The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Meehan, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Timmons, let me ask you a question right from the outset, please. The President issued regulations from the Administration stressing the importance of giving 60 days notice and comment. We've heard some questions about this issue, and we've heard a lot about EPA. What has your experience been with EPA's abiding by that regulation, that request?
60 days oftentimes is not adequate, first and foremost. But with the experience of manufacturers with the EPA has not been a particularly harmonious one, and it's not, in all candor, it's not. It hasn't just occurred in this administration. The last administration was very difficult to have meaningful conversations with. I was Chief of Staff of a state government in the 90s, and one of the things that we attempted to do was to have a collaborative relationship with our regulating agencies, our environmental permitting and regulating agency, with the business community, because we all agreed that we wanted cleaner air and cleaner water, and we found that the best way to achieve that was to work together to achieve those goals. Now, it didn't always work, and sometimes businesses had to be they had issues that could not be resolved in a collaborative way. But we did find that when we worked together, we were able to resolve issues quickly and achieve goals that did not harm the economic competitiveness of our state. And we'd like to see that be the case with EPA. We're happy to see the President's regulatory executive order. It doesn't apply necessarily to the EPA, but we think it's a step in the right direction.
Well, if you could help me to the extent that you can by asking some of your constituencies to give us a record on that, because I know the issue arose today, and I was in preparation for this. I have a letter from Charles Travana, who's the President of the National Petroleum and Refiners Association, and I'm quoting his language. In relation to chemicals regulation, there's been little transparency into the regulatory process in the EPA in recent years. For example, EPA no longer holds public meetings when crafting regulations. In the past, they routinely held public meetings. So I know this is an issue. I have 2 refineries, 2,000 direct jobs in my backyard. We keep talking about sending jobs overseas. We're competing with refineries overseas that it's cheaper for them to send oil refined from Nigeria into my backyard than it is for my refineries to do that. And those 2,000 jobs are teetering on the line by virtue of these EPA policies. As I've talked to the folks down here, we're getting so many mixed messages. One, you talked about working together. They're giving regulations for greenhouse gases, but vague guidelines. You talked about BACT, which is the best available control technology. They're delaying any kind of interpretation on this and then opening the company to the extent that if they put in something, that can be litigated later that it wasn't the best available technology, and it will require the company not only just to litigate this, but they can lose the benefit of the investment that they've already made.
Well, that's an example of a regulatory process that really doesn't make sense. And one of the things that we have advocated as the National Association of Manufacturers is that, as I mentioned before, it's 18% more expensive to do business here in the United States. Part of the reason for that is our regulatory burden. And we believe that our goal should be, and the goal of policymakers should be, that this is the best country in the world in which to headquarter a corporation, that it's the best company or best country in the world in which to practice and research and development, and that we need to be obviously the best country in the world in which to manufacture so that we can export our products. The only way to do that is to have lower costs for manufacturers, including regulatory burdens and common sense regulatory processes that don't have manufacturers saying it doesn't make sense to do business in this country anymore. I know that Boeing is one of your constituents as well, Congressman, and every day they have to spend a tremendous amount of their resources trying to ensure that they comply with regulations, and they spend an enormous amount of resources in doing that.
You use the language common sense, and it is something that we all care about. Air quality, to be sure. We need to focus on it. But CAA regulations right now in my very refineries are requiring the facilities to install advanced technologies. But by virtue of doing that, they're going to use more energy than they currently do for the process. Then they're going to be penalized for the greenhouse gas that's associated with the very technologies that they're being required to put in by the EPA. Where's the common sense in that process, as the result of that means that those jobs are going to be competing with a Nigerian oil that doesn't have the same requirement, that's going to take that market away from the workers in my district?
Yeah, I don't think you would see me defending that as a common sense move. So,
may I just ask one last question, Mr. Chairman? Before just winners and losers. They've picked two industries when they've decided EPA
so far
is refineries when they were required to do the new source performance standards. How can agencies pick winners and losers in the private market with regard to which regulations that
the gentleman can answer briefly.
Well, I think the bottom line, Congressman, is they shouldn't, and the free market should be allowed to determine who's going to succeed in our economy, and by so doing, I think we'll end up creating long-term economic growth.